What's up, guys? Winning day yesterday, 1-0 with the Rutgers Bowl play in the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl. They pretty much had that game. They had a really good rushing attack in that game. Defense was pretty good. They tried to throw it away at the end by allowing that touchdown drive when it looked like the game was over and then not recovering the onside kick. I was like, oh, come on. Don't let this happen. Crazy things happen in college bowl games, but they were able to still put it away, finish the game, win, get out of there. Good win for Rutgers. We move on to today. I really don't love today's card much at all. I guess I'll talk about the bowls first. I actually do have a bowl play in the first one up at noon, the taxslayer.com Gator Bowl. Is that what this is? Yeah, in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida. This is Clemson and Kentucky, and the market looks like it's agreeing with me. At some point, I guess this opened at Clemson 7.5, but I've seen it around 5 or 4.5 almost the entire time the line has been out. Clemson, 52% of the tickets, but 63% of the cash on Kentucky, and it looks like there is some reverse line movement and the cash discrepancy, all going against the public who are more on Clemson. All of that is going towards Kentucky, the cash discrepancy and the reverse line movement. I agree with it. I'm taking Kentucky plus 4.5 in this one. Clemson, I think they meet the criteria as one of the more disappointed teams on the bowl slate here. And one of the things I like about this is that I think this game is a little bit easier to deal with, to gauge, because there aren't like very key opt-outs in this one. There are a lot of backups and stuff on both teams that are hitting the transfer portal here, but the starters basically are all going to be there, I believe, as far as I know. So I think that's the case here. I think that Clemson, they started the season ranked in the top 10, man. They had higher aspirations than this for sure. They're Clemson, man. When you're Clemson, even though you've had a couple of down years, you start the season ranked 9. You expect that you're at least going to the ACC title game. You might be in the playoff picture there, playoff contention. That wound up not being the case at all, even though Clemson did actually finish pretty strong. They won their last 4 games. So that does lead me to believe that they did not give up, really. But the question is this really that much of a reward for them? Do they really want to be in the Gator Bowl when I think they had their sights set on some bigger bowl than this? Kentucky, on the other hand, I don't think really did, even though they were ranked really early in the season. I think when Kentucky got that reality check against Georgia, I think that was so early in the season that is actually helpful to them. It helps you like realize like how good you really are and like shift your aspirations, or how not that good maybe you actually are. Shift your aspirations. So I think Kentucky didn't really have high aspirations like Clemson did here for sure. So I think Kentucky might be more motivated to be in this game, in the Gator Bowl. They played in, I don't know, some similar bowl last year, I think, and they got blanked by Iowa. So some of the guys on Kentucky, if they were there for that game, they probably want to redeem themselves for getting totally shut out in a bowl game last year. Of course, that was against a good Iowa defense. Iowa always plays really good defense, and Kentucky had actually beaten Iowa in a bowl the previous year, and it might have been the same bowl too. I don't even know. So that was a weird kind of like bowl revenge angle there almost, which I think I was actually on Iowa in that one, if I remember correctly. But now we're going to flip the script. We're going to go back on Kentucky here. I like it. I think Clemson's motivation is a little bit more questionable here, because I think they had higher, they had their sights set higher to start the season, even though, yeah, you could argue that they also like took a beating really early on. That loss to Duke almost like right out of the gate, basically kind of knocked them down and like put them in their place, and maybe defeated their aspirations of being like a playoff contender. But I think they still expected to be like in the ACC like title picture or something like that, and that never happened. They wound up not even playing Louisville either. And Kentucky, they're in the SEC, man. Clemson's in the ACC. Kentucky played a tougher schedule than Clemson did, even though Clemson did face Florida State. That was the best team that they faced on the schedule, and they did face Notre Dame. But I don't know. That might have been a questionable spot that Notre Dame was in that one. I don't know, because Notre Dame, one of the better defenses they faced, but Notre Dame, Clemson took Notre Dame out, and I don't know what the situation was in that game, but I don't know how much we can take away from that result there. But Clemson did not face nearly as tough a schedule as Kentucky did. Kentucky faced Georgia, Alabama. They faced a bunch of really good teams in the SEC, man. So Kentucky, they faced a tougher schedule. They're more battle tested, even though, yeah, Clemson is the somewhat better team here. I think the line of around 4.5 is pretty much about where it should be on a neutral field, I would say. That's kind of what I would make it in a game between these two teams. I think Clemson being a ranked team, I think it looks a little bit too easy to take Clemson. People probably don't like what they've seen out of Kentucky down the stretch. They looked ugly, and typically I don't like that in a bowl game. But I think when you're playing Clemson in a bowl game, man, you're playing like a name team here. I think that might motivate Kentucky a bit here. They want to do something here. Kentucky has a pretty balanced offense, too, and they're pretty good at rushing the football. And Clemson's defense is not as good stopping the run. They're better at stopping the pass than the run. So I don't know. I don't know what's gonna happen here, but Kentucky's offensive strengths might match up a little bit better here against Clemson. I like it. I like what I'm seeing in the market. I think Clemson has to be the more disappointing team here just because of the history of the program. You start out with much higher aspirations. You started out in the top 10 and you fall into the Gator Bowl. And you still have the aspect of this where Clemson is still a rated team and a ranked team and Kentucky is not. So the public's still going to be on the Clemson side. I think it looks too easy. Kentucky, like I said, they face a tougher schedule. They might have a bit more of the motivation here. They're getting points. I like it. I'm on Kentucky plus 4.5. In the Sun Bowl, which is the next one up, which is the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl, I think is what it is. They're great. This is, which, by the way, I didn't know that Tony the Tiger, his voice back in the day was Thurl Ravenscroft. Speaking of Christmas, he is also the singer for the You're a Mean One, Mr. Grinch. He is the singer of that song as well. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl here. Thurl Ravenscroft. Notre Dame and Oregon State. Notre Dame's down from 10.5 to 6. They do have 65% of the cash and 62% of the tickets, though. So it looks like the cash discrepancy is a little bit on Notre Dame. This is one of the toughest games to figure out because the line, I don't know what you can take away from the line movement here because both teams have had their quarterbacks hit the transfer portal. This is one of the rare bowls, I think, where both starting quarterbacks are not going to play in this bowl game, as far as I know. And that's caused the total to crash from 47.5 to 40.5, which is a crazy tanking of the over under there. And it looks like the money is also on the under at 55% of the cash on the under, but 65% of the tickets on the over. So it looks like the over is public too, but that's kind of crazy because I would tend to think that's kind of an overreaction because it's like when both of your quarterbacks aren't there, yeah, that's going to affect your offense. But so you do have to drop the total a bit. But is that an overreaction to that? Like, it might tell you these teams might not be totally motivated and maybe their defenses might not play like the most intense defense that you might have seen out of them otherwise. So I don't know, man. It might be an overreaction on the total tanking like that. And on the side, I really honestly have not much of a clue here. I don't know why the line has dropped so much, given that both teams have lost their starting quarterbacks. It seems like it shouldn't have dropped as much as it has. Notre Dame is the better team, but Oregon State, not really that bad of a team. I think Oregon State's been a bit underrated for most of the season, but now they've lost Ugalele, who I've been making fun of him for his name, their quarterback there. He was a Clemson transfer out into Oregon State. He has been pretty good on the season. He's out for this game. Notre Dame, I forget what the name of their quarterback is. He's hitting the transfer portal. He's hitting the NFL draft, excuse me. He's going to the NFL draft. So they're not going to be in this game. It's just really hard to gauge this game at all, man. I've seen the line continuing to tick down a little bit to lower numbers. So I don't know, maybe the slight lean would be to the Oregon State side on the side there, but that's really tough to do. I mean, Notre Dame, certainly the bigger name team, but I don't know if they had like higher preseason aspirations this year or not. Oregon State likely did not. So I don't know what to expect out of that one in El Paso, Texas there. How many more games are there? How many games do we have today? 2 more, 4 today. The Liberty Bowl in Memphis, Tennessee is literally on Memphis's home field, and Memphis is in this game, and Iowa State is up from 6 to 10.5. I don't know when the line was 6 because I make this line about 9.5. I think Iowa State is significantly better than Memphis. Iowa State's got 57% of the cash and 51% of the tickets are on Memphis. I think the public probably is looking at this and says, hey, Memphis has a record that's better by 2 games. How are they getting this many points against Iowa State? Iowa State really, I believe, is that much better than Memphis. Memphis played a really weak schedule in a weak conference. Iowa State, actually, I would say I make this line about 9.5, maybe on a neutral, though. So at Memphis's home stadium, it's a little bit questionable, even though I'd still lean to Iowa State a little bit. Both of these teams are pretty much intact, I think, even though they've had numerous people hitting the transfer portal. And I think Iowa State has had more players opt out of this game, but I think the key components of the offenses are still there for both of these teams. Iowa State, they play defense, though. They have a good defense. Memphis does not. I don't know if Memphis played a defense like Iowa State's all season. So if Iowa State wants to win this game, I think they should be able to do that. They're a huge favorite. Covering that huge number, maybe a little bit questionable. I would still lean to Iowa State a little bit there just because of what I'm seeing in the market and because I think the line it's almost a line where the public is just going to be grabbing Memphis, thinking that there's value, taking the points because they know they probably know Memphis is at home too. Memphis is a pretty name team, kind of like they're a known name, at least in college sports. And probably they don't like how Iowa State plays ugly football because they are more of a defensive team. So their style of play has been pretty ugly this year, but they played a much more difficult schedule than Memphis over in the Big 12. So the lean would be to Iowa State there. And then the Cotton Bowl tonight in Arlington, Texas, which is I kind of see this as kind of like the Bastard Bowl because it's one of the bowls that's like almost one of the New Year's Six bowls, but it isn't quite one of them. But it is the Cotton Bowl and it has all that mystique around it. This is Missouri and Ohio State. Normally, I would want to take Missouri here, but this is a really tough game to figure out what's going on here. I would want to fade Ohio State because, of course, Ohio State, they expected to be in the college football playoff this year, man. They expected nothing short of that, and they fell way short of that. And the only reason they did is because they barely lost to Michigan. That was their only loss on the season, I'm pretty sure. And that alone has knocked them not only out of the college football playoff, but into – is this still considered a New Year's Six Bowl, even though it's on the 29th? I don't even know, but they've been knocked down into the Cotton Bowl. So normally I would say this is like one of those motivation handicap type of games here. Ohio State can't have that much motivation. I really don't like their coach either, Ryan Day, with the dyed goatee there. I think he's kind of a psycho. I think he's a head case. I don't like anything. I don't think there's much to like about Ohio State here. They're down from 7 to 4.5, although the line movement has been really crazy on this game. It went from 7 to really 6.5 on Ohio State, all the way to Missouri being a 2-point favorite probably about a week or so ago. And now it's swung all the way back to Ohio State being a 4.5-point favorite. I don't know what is causing all those moves. I think the move down on Ohio State was certainly because McCord, I believe their quarterback, he opted out. And I don't know if now the swing back is because he's like reversed that decision. He's coming back. I really have no idea why the line has swung back towards Ohio State so significantly, because the initial move kind of made sense to me because McCord being out, that would swing the line quite a bit there. I think, I'm pretty sure that McCord is still not going to be playing in this game. I think it is going to be Devin Brown, I guess, at quarterback for Ohio State. So I don't understand why the line is swung back towards Ohio State. The cash discrepancy, like I said, is on Missouri. I think the motivational aspects of this are on the Missouri side. I think this is a big game for Missouri, man. They exceeded expectations big time. Nobody expected Missouri to do what they did this year. And now they're in the Cotton Bowl as like the 9th ranked team in the country, and they get to play Ohio State. I think that's a pretty big deal for Missouri. It's one of the bigger bowls in program history. So if it weren't for all this weird line movement and trying to gauge like the transfers out, which I think the biggest one is Ohio State's quarterback, like I said, I would want to be on Missouri here, but it's just tough, like especially with the line having gone towards Missouri, but then swinging back the other way. It's just really difficult to gauge this game, really difficult to gauge that like horseshoe line movement there. So it's really tough to do. Like generally from a motivational standpoint, I would be on Missouri here though, because this is a big deal for their program being in a bowl like this, whereas Ohio State, they're like a few points away from being in the college football playoff. And because of that game, they also didn't make the Big Ten championship because they were on the same side of the Big Ten in the same division as Michigan. So even though they were the second best team in the Big Ten, they didn't even make the Big Ten championship game, and Iowa did because Ohio State's in the same division as Michigan. So they didn't even make that game. They didn't get to play that weekend either. And it's like they've just been like totally forgotten about. And that's a spot where that usually you see like a team not be totally motivated in a bowl in a situation like Ohio State is where they've fallen so far from what the aspirations were. But we will see. I do lean to Missouri in that one, though, just because the way that I handicap these bowls, the motivational standpoint tells me that Missouri still has to be the side here. And I really like want to do it. I just can't because of what I've seen in the live movement throughout like the 2 weeks or so. So I just can't do it, man. So those are the bowls today. Going to, where do we want to go here? NBA. I just don't like what I'm seeing in the NBA card at all. You got Boston. They're laying like, I think they're down from, what are they down from? Boston Celtics. They're down from 9.5 to 8 at home against the Toronto Raptors. But the one thing that kind of keeps me off of this is that the Celtics are on a back-to-back, although I think they rested Jaylen Brown last night, and I believe he'll play in this game. I don't think he's hurt because he played in the Lakers game. They did have some other injuries around that time. They were on the road there. They had Tatum and Porzingis, I think, were hurt for 1 or 2 games in that stretch, but I don't think Brown was. So I think Brown was just being rested yesterday because it was the Detroit Pistons, and the Celtics probably are focused a little bit more on the Toronto game, even though Toronto also sucks. The thing that just makes me not want to lay Boston here, though, is the fact that it is a back-to-back. Because normally I would want to be on Boston because of what they did yesterday. My Celtics, they came home from a road trip. I mentioned it yesterday. It was a bad spot for them. They were laying 17 points or something in that range against the Detroit Pistons, who are putting up some historically bad numbers here, historically bad loss streaks, and the Celtics were down 19 at the half in that game, and they wound up erasing the entire deficit in one quarter, in the third quarter, and wound up winning that game, although it took them into overtime to do it. I think the Celtics, they were in that return home spot. It was a distracted spot. They were also away for Christmas, so they might have come home and had to do like Christmas-related things too, so I don't think they were paying attention to Detroit at all, and then once Detroit punched them in the mouth, they said, all right, we got to focus on this game. And they had a good second half and wound up taking care of business, winning the game. But then I think that's like a scare. So that would put the Celtics in a better spot to like make adjustments and play a better game in the next game. I just don't want to do it on a back-to-back when Toronto has more rest. I think Toronto's certainly going to be focused here as well, even though Toronto, I think, is coming off a win of their own, right? Mentioned that the Wizards were not in a good spot in that game against Toronto, and I'd lean to Toronto, even though they were laying all those points on the road. So that one's just tough to gauge, and the line looks like it's moving in Toronto's direction a little bit. I don't have anything on the NBA slate, even though it's an NBA Friday, and there are a lot of NBA games. I just don't like it. And then San Antonio, Portland is in that zigzag spot. They played last night in the same exact matchup. Both of these teams on a back-to-back now because of it, and on a third game in 4 nights. Portland, I believe they opened around 4.5 yesterday, and they dropped all the way to somewhere around the vicinity of 3. Maybe it was at 3.5 before the game tipped off, and San Antonio won the game outright, totally dominated the game, but Portland actually dominated the rebounding aspect of that game, but they were just so far out of the game. The shooting percentages, there was a huge shooting percentage discrepancy. Portland shot at like an abnormally low percentage from the field in that game. San Antonio, I think, played some pretty good defense in that game. But Portland dominated on the board. So Portland is still the better team here. So I would lean to Portland in this game, but the line is at 5.5. So the books know, man, that this is a zigzag, and the books have adjusted for the zigzag. So I don't know how much value there's going to be in Portland at that price. If you could get it at like 3.5 or maybe even 4, like where it opened yesterday, I might be on the Portland Trailblazers here, but I don't think I can do it because the books have adjusted it too much for, I don't know if like there's somebody, I don't know if San Antonio might be like resting guys for this one or whatever, because they just won yesterday and they do have Boston up next. So maybe that's That puts them in a look-ahead spot as well. So I would still only lean to the Portland Trailblazers in this one, in the zigzag, and it being a kind of a look-ahead for San Antonio there potentially, but not going to get involved just because I think the price is a little bit high on the Blazers, and it looks like it's actually gone up from 5 to 5.5, so I just can't really do it, but that is a zigzag spot there. So the lean would be to the Trailblazers. And the Trailblazers, like I said, they were still dominating on the boards in that game against San Antonio. I think Portland is still the better team, so they had a bad shooting night in that game last night. Didn't play great defense last night, and I think they're in the spot where they lost to that same team, so they're the team that's going to make all the adjustments, whereas San Antonio, it's the typical zigzag. Like, you played a game where you couldn't have played any better, really, and like, what do you have to adjust coming into this game now that you played that game? You don't have anything to adjust, really. So that's the thing about the zigzag spot. Portland would be the side, in the spot to like readjust, but I'm just not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to get there with it. Going to hockey, I don't have any plays either, which kind of crazy to think about, but I just don't. I think Ottawa probably not in a really good spot because they just went out. They played some tough games here over this stretch, but after the holiday break, they went over to Toronto and they won in Toronto. That's a big win for Ottawa, upsetting their like in-province big brother kind of there in Toronto, who's been the bigger brother to them in Ontario for a while. And now they come back home again, face the New Jersey Devils, who hadn't really been playing good hockey for a while, but they've started playing a little bit better. But the Devils, coming out of the holiday break, they played Columbus and had to go into overtime to beat Columbus. So I think the Devils, that might be a game that might like refocus them a little bit, because they didn't play very well against a team that's much worse than they are in Columbus, and they almost got caught in that game. So that might have them focused. However, they do have Boston up tomorrow, so it is a look ahead. So I don't think I can do it. I can't play against Ottawa, even though they are in the letdown. New Jersey's down from -117 to -116 as the money line road favorite here. They got 98% of the cash and 83% of the tickets. So even though it looks like the line has ticked down a little bit on them, they have the cash discrepancy, but they're a public road favorite. So I don't know what to think about that one. I don't know what to do about that one. What else we got here? Colorado Avalanche. They just lost to the Arizona Coyotes, almost to the Phoenix Coyotes. That is what they were 2 nights ago in overtime. They blew a huge lead. They just beaten Arizona the game prior to that, before the holidays. Is it possible they got caught looking ahead to this game against St. Louis? But why would they be looking ahead to St. Louis? Well, it's because St. Louis, the only time they played them this year, or no, sorry, St. Louis did, wait a minute, what? No, they played them twice this year. Excuse me. They did beat them the first time they played them this year, but then the last time they played them this year, they lost at home to St. Louis 8-2. So that might make this a little bit of a road reversal revenge type of thing for Colorado if they remember that game. It was such a bad loss that maybe they do remember that, because they lost 8-2, man, on their home ice to St. Louis. So they might have this game circled just for that reason. But I just can't lay like a road price like this. And St. Louis is not in a good spot either. They just beat Dallas 2 days ago. That's a big win, but is St. Louis going to be totally unfocused with Colorado coming into their house? Probably not. I mean, this is another big game. It's just going to be, will they run out of gas after they just played a big game against Dallas? St. Louis seems to maybe have Dallas's number, though, because they've actually won 2 games in a row against Dallas now, I think. So Colorado is down from -180 to -160 as a moneyline road favorite as well. But they do have the cash discrepancy at 86% of the cash and 75% of the tickets. So they do have the cash discrepancy, but they're a public road favorite here. And the line has moved against them, though. So there's a lot going on to try to read out of this market here and out of the situation here, really. So I just can't quite do it, even though there is that revenge aspect for Colorado, and they're probably in a bounce back spot. And St. Louis might be in a spot where they might run out of gas, but it is still Colorado coming into their house. And Colorado's probably not going to be really an undervalued team in the market either, because they are the Colorado Avalanche. So that's how I look at that one. And then, the last 2 games on the hockey slate, Arizona, I just mentioned, they just beat Colorado. So it's like, well, they're in a letdown spot, so you'd want to go against them. That was a 1-game homestand. Now they have to go back out on the road to face Anaheim. Will they really pay attention to Anaheim? Maybe not. And they did lose to Anaheim the last time they played them, though. So that might be one thing that might keep you off of it a little bit. They lost in overtime at Anaheim the last time they played them. But they're coming off an overtime win over Colorado, a huge comeback for Arizona, huge win there. They have to go to Anaheim, who is not a very good team at all. And then they have Florida on deck. So one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference up on deck. So it is a sandwich spot for Arizona. But then it's like, all right, so you want to take Anaheim here, right? Nah, well, not so fast, because even though there is that aspect of it where maybe they'll take Anaheim a little bit seriously just because Anaheim beat them last time they played them. If they remember that, I don't know. But Anaheim 2 days ago, they had a huge win of their own. They smacked Vegas 5-2. So Anaheim's in a letdown spot as well. So unfortunately, I can't get involved in this. Both of these teams are in spots where I'd want to go against both of them. And the market read has conflicting signals as well here, where Arizona's down from -140 to -128 as a road money line favorite. So the line's moving towards Anaheim. But Arizona looks like they have a significant cash discrepancy with 71% of the cash on them, but 80% of the tickets on Anaheim. That doesn't totally make sense to me, though. The cash discrepancy would be on Arizona, and that the ticket percentage would be on Anaheim, really. That doesn't make any sense to me. Anaheim has the much worse record than Arizona does, so I don't see why the public would want to have anything to do with Anaheim here, even though they did just beat Vegas. Arizona just beat Colorado, so some weird stuff going on in that one. So unfortunately, I can't get involved in that one either. If Arizona was playing an opponent in some other situation, if Anaheim had gotten crushed by Vegas or something like that, I would probably be on Anaheim here. I would like it a lot more. Excuse me. And then Philadelphia, Seattle is unfortunately also not a good spot for either team. You go, well, Seattle's definitely in a bad spot because they're returning home from a road trip, although the Christmas break was in the middle there, so they probably did go home. So that kind of disrupts the fact that it was a road trip a little bit there, where they started the road trip. Their original road trip was the 18th to 23rd, a 3-game trip. They won 2 of the 3 and only lost to Dallas in overtime. But then they probably came home, had the holidays. Then they went back out to Calgary and they won at Calgary. And now they're returning home again. They got Philadelphia coming in, but I think it's still, even though it's not a full road trip return spot here for Seattle, I think it's still not that good a spot for Seattle because they have Vegas up next on New Year's, and that is the Winter Classic, I believe, because it starred here, even though that game is in Seattle. I think it is probably in the Seattle Seahawks Stadium. Is that where it is? I believe it is. Yeah, it's definitely the Winter Classic, so it's an outdoor it's an outdoor hockey game. It's, the annual thing that goes on here. That is the Winter Classic. It's being advertised. It's a huge game on New Year's. So I think Seattle's going to potentially be looking ahead to that game. So I think it's a bad spot for Seattle. I can't play Seattle here, and that game being against Vegas as well. But you look over at Philadelphia, they're in a letdown spot. They had a big break for the holidays. They lost 2 going into the holidays. They came out of the holiday break, and they beat Vancouver on the road 4-1. Big win, but that was last night. So they're in a letdown spot and a back-to-back. So I just can't do it, man. I can't get involved in this one either. I don't like it that both of these games, Arizona, Anaheim, and Philadelphia, Seattle, both involve teams that are in bad spots. I just can't do it. It sucks, but just there's no way we can do it here. Seattle's sitting at -130 as the home money line favorite. They got 89% of the tickets and 88% of the cash on them. So it looks like they're just sitting there as the home favorite. The line not really moving as of yet. And it looks like for some reason Philadelphia has a little bit of the cash discrepancy, and Seattle is the public team here, which doesn't totally register with me because I think Philadelphia has the significantly better record. So some weird stuff going on here. A little bit difficult to gauge here. Why that would be the case and what's going on in those games. So I just can't tell you what's going on there, man. I have nothing else left to say there, but I do have a play in college basketball. College basketball resuming here. When all these teams are resuming from holiday break, it's pretty tough to kind of try to gauge what's going on in some of these games here. But let me see what I can get for a number on this here because I've not actually played it yet. But let me see. Yeah, +10 we're going to do here. So I'm looking at this market, and I noticed McNeese State, McNeese, not McNeese. I'm pretty sure it's McNeese. I think they just go by McNeese now. McNeese at Michigan. Michigan's sitting there only a 10-point favorite. It looks like it's gone down from 10.5 to 10, although 10 with juice. It looks like it might be swinging back up a little bit, but this number is a little bit strange, man. So you look at this number, like it looks too easy to take Michigan because Michigan's a Big Ten team. Who's McNeese State? Nobody knows. Nobody cares. So how is Michigan laying 10, only 10? It looks it almost looks too easy to take Michigan here. The line looks soft. And I think when I saw it a little while ago, it was actually below 10. It was actually at 9.5 at one point. It's like, that just looks really suspicious. Like, why is the line like that? This is Michigan, even though they have some losses this year. Most of the losses are to pretty good teams, except for Long Beach. Although Long Beach, I don't even think is really that bad, but that's probably the most inexplicable loss. Michigan did go into the holiday break off of I think a double overtime loss to Florida. That was a total barn burner, but I don't know if that makes this a little bit of a sandwich spot, though, because, will they be totally paying attention to McNeese after such a big game against Florida? That was not a game where Michigan got, caught by, a lesser team or anything like that. Florida is actually the slightly better team over Michigan, I think. Florida was actually the favorite in that one. And then Michigan does start Big Ten play next game, although it's against Minnesota. I would probably like this a little bit better if it was against a team that was a little bit bigger in the Big Ten than Minnesota, but it is still a Big Ten game coming up next on the 4th. So does that make this a little bit of a sandwich? I don't know, because they've had a lot of time off to kind of forget about that Florida game, but did that Florida game kind of disrupt their momentum, or are they still going to be cold? Because they still had to get up for that game. It was still a pretty big effort game. Are they going to be a little bit cold coming into this game against McNeese? And it doesn't look too easy to take Michigan. I think it kind of does. Even though McNeese does have the better record, who are they really? They're a team in the Southland. Nobody cares. They don't have any impressive wins really, except they did beat, they beat UAB and they beat VCU. Those aren't terrible wins there really. And I think McNeese is actually a decent team this year. And they lost to Louisiana Tech. That's not really a horrible loss either on the road. I think McNeese is flying under the radar. I think they're a decent team. They might be the best team in the Southland Conference, which people aren't used to. I don't think they've been relevant even in that small conference for quite a while. And yeah, they have conference play coming up next, but look at the spot that they're in, man. They're starting a trip, going out to Michigan. This is the biggest game on their schedule. You get to go out and face a Big Ten team. I think you're going to be pumped for that. They don't have any other big conference teams on the entire schedule, really, unless you think that VCU and the A-10 was one of them. This is their biggest game, man, on the schedule. It's a Big Ten matchup. They're going over to Ann Arbor. I think they're going to step up for this one. And what did McNeese do going into their holiday break? They won against Louisiana, but they were a big favorite against Louisiana of 6.5, 7 points, and they almost lost the game. Louisiana had a big lead in that game. Midway into the second half, Louisiana was beating them by double digits on their home floor and on McNeese's home floor. McNeese had to come all the way back and win that game. So that might kind of that plus the holiday break might have them really refocused on this. They almost lost a game that they certainly should not have been in danger of losing, really, as a fairly big favorite against Louisiana Lafayette there. They're going into Michigan, which is the biggest game on their schedule. The line looks a little bit suspect, with Michigan being a Big Ten team, not really favored by that much against McNeese. And looking at KenPom here, KenPom, the numbers are pretty interesting in their power rankings. I don't know if there are injuries coming into play here. They have Michigan as not really the greatest team. They have this line only at a 7-point game here. Oh, man. So I think maybe you become one of the numbers guys here, but I do think the situation still kind of calls for it as well, because they do have their Big Ten opener up next, which they might be focused more on that than on this game. I don't know if they're still going to have a little bit of a hangover effect from a barn burner 2 overtime game against Florida that was now 10 days ago before going into the holiday break. I don't know what their mindset is going to be like here. They probably went home for the holidays. Now they have to return back to college. So you return back from college and you might have to get settled in your new classes and stuff like that too, even though, oh, these are basketball players, though. Do they really care about class? Who knows? But you do still have to get settled back in college as well, whereas McNeese, they get to go on the road. So I think those distractions get thrown out the window too, because they get to go somewhere else and just focus on basketball here. So I'm on McNeese State plus 10, or McNeese plus 10. That's going to do it for me, man. I think, did I run over the whole slate? I think I did. That's a large slate here for a Friday, and it boils down to me only being on 2 plays that I don't even know if I particularly love them, but I'm on Kentucky in the TaxSlayer.com Gator Bowl at plus 4.5 or whatever I said. I think it's 4.5. And I'm on McNeese in college basketball plus 10 against Michigan. Let's do it. Let's get it done. Have a good day, man. Take it easy and peace.